Think back to the very first time you booted up GTA 4. Not the first mission, not the first gunfight, just those first few minutes. Nico Bellic steps off a cargo ship after a long journey across the Atlantic. Roman is waiting for him at the docks, talking a mile a minute about luxury apartments, sports cars, and the incredible life he's built in America. For a moment, you almost believe him. Then you get into his beat-up taxi. You drive through Broker, and within minutes, that dream starts to fall apart. The apartment is a mess. The neighborhood feels rough. The streets are covered in litter. The buildings look worn down. Traffic crawls through the intersections. People argue on sidewalks. Police sirens echo somewhere in the distance. And the sky has this dull gray tint that almost never seems to disappear. Right away, Rockstar tells you something without ever saying it out loud. This isn't a city that's trying to impress you. It's a city that's simply trying to survive. That's what made GTA 4 so different. When people talk about Grand Theft Auto, the conversation usually revolves around freedom. The massive maps, the chaos, the insane stunts, flying fighter jets, launching tanks off mountains, or seeing how long you can survive with 5 stars. And don't get me wrong, that's always been part of what makes this series special. But GTA 4 had a different goal. Instead of asking, how much fun can we pack into this world? Rockstar asked something much more interesting. What would it actually feel like to live here? Even after all these years, that's still the first thing that stands out every time I come back to Liberty City. Not the graphics, not the missions, not even the physics. It's the atmosphere. Because Liberty City doesn't feel like a video game level. It feels like a real place. You can almost smell the rain-soaked concrete. You can almost hear the subway beneath your feet. You can almost imagine thousands of people going about their day whether you're there or not. And that's something very few open-world games manage to pull off. What's funny is that back in 2008, not everyone appreciated that direction. Some players thought the driving was too heavy. Others thought the game was too serious. Some even felt like Rockstar had taken away a lot of the fun that San Andreas offered. And honestly, I understand why. If you went into GTA 4 expecting another San Andreas, it probably felt slower, darker, and a little restrictive. But nearly 2 decades later, something interesting has happened. A lot of those same players have gone back to GTA 4 and realized something they didn't notice the first time. Rockstar wasn't trying to make a bigger world. They were trying to make a more believable one. And in many ways, they succeeded. Today, when people talk about GTA 4, one word comes up again and again. Realism. Not because the game perfectly recreates real life. It doesn't. You can still steal cars, survive ridiculous crashes, and cause absolute chaos. It's still Grand Theft Auto. But underneath all of that is a level of detail and authenticity that makes everything feel just a little more grounded than most games in the series. From the way people react to you, to the weight of every vehicle, to the story it tells, everything feels connected by one simple idea: make the world believable. So today, I want to take a look back at what made GTA 4 feel so different. Why Liberty City still feels alive all these years later. And why some of the realism Rockstar built into this game quietly disappeared over time. The biggest compliments you can give an open-world game is that it doesn't need you. That sounds strange at first, but think about it. A lot of games are built entirely around the player. Everything waits for you. NPCs stand in place until you arrive. Events don't happen until you trigger them. The world feels frozen until you interact with it. Liberty City isn't like that. The moment you step onto its streets, it feels like you're walking into a city that already existed before Nico arrived. And it'll keep going long after he's gone. That's a really difficult illusion to create. And Rockstar pulled it off through hundreds of little details that most players probably never even noticed. Take something as simple as walking down the sidewalk. If you've ever slowed down instead of sprinting from mission to mission, you'll notice people constantly interacting with the world around them. Some are talking on their phones. Others are arguing. Friends stop to chat outside convenience stores. Construction workers gather around unfinished buildings. Taxi drivers lean against their cars waiting for passengers. Street musicians perform for whoever happens to walk by. Homeless people ask strangers for money. Office workers rush to catch a cab. None of these moments are important to the gameplay. Most of them don't reward you with money or unlock a side quest. They're just there. Because cities are full of moments that don't involve you. And that's exactly why they feel real. Another thing GTA 4 does incredibly well is making every neighborhood feel distinct. Broker doesn't feel like Algonquin. Algonquin doesn't feel like Alderney. Each borough has its own personality, its own architecture, its own atmosphere, its own people. When you finally reach Algonquin after spending hours in Broker, it genuinely feels like you've entered a different part of the city. The streets get wider, the buildings get taller, traffic becomes heavier, everything suddenly feels louder. Then later, when you head into Alderney, the mood changes all over again. Industrial areas replace towering skyscrapers. Warehouses dominate the skyline. It's subtle world building, but it makes the map feel much larger than it actually is. And then there's the weather. This might sound like a small thing, but it completely changes how Liberty City feels. Rain in GTA 4 isn't just a visual effect. Roads become slick. Headlights reflect off wet pavement. The city feels colder, more isolated. Even driving at night during a thunderstorm creates an atmosphere that's hard to describe until you've experienced it yourself. You aren't thinking about objectives anymore. You're just existing in the world. That's something GTA 4 constantly encourages. Sometimes I'll load up an old save with no intention of completing a mission. I'll grab a random car, turn the radio on, and just drive. Not because I'm trying to accomplish anything, but because Liberty City is one of those rare places that's enjoyable simply to spend time in. And honestly, that's probably the biggest reason people still return to it today. Not for collectibles, not for achievements, not because there's an endless checklist waiting for them. They come back because the city itself is the attraction. That's a quality that's incredibly hard to build, and even harder to explain. It's something you feel more than you see. Liberty City never begs for your attention. It earns it. If Liberty City was the heart of GTA 4, then its physics were the soul. It's one of those things that you don't really appreciate until you go back and play it again. Back in 2008, people talked about the graphics, the story, the driving, but very few people stopped to think about why everything felt so believable. It wasn't just because the game looked realistic. It was because it behaved realistically. Almost every action had a physical reaction. And nearly 20 years later, a lot of those little details still hold up surprisingly well. Let's start with the driving. This was probably the biggest complaint when GTA 4 first launched. People said the cars felt too heavy, too slow to respond, too difficult to control. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The first time you jump into Roman's taxi, it almost feels like you're driving a boat. You take a corner too quickly, and suddenly the whole car leans over as the suspension shifts underneath you. Brake a little too late, and the front of the car dips forward. Hit the accelerator too aggressively coming out of a turn, and the rear tires start fighting for grip. First, it almost feels awkward, especially if you're coming straight from San Andreas. But then something happens. You adjust. You stop trying to drive every car like it's a supercar. You learn to brake before corners instead of during them. You pay attention to the road. And before long, the handling starts to make sense. Every vehicle has its own personality. A sports car feels quick and responsive. A taxi feels heavy but predictable. A large SUV rolls more through corners. A delivery truck takes forever to stop. Even motorcycles demand more attention than they do in most open-world games. It's not perfect. Some cars definitely exaggerate their body roll. But that's also what makes driving memorable. You're not just holding the accelerator and pointing the car in a direction. You're actually controlling its weight. That feeling is something a lot of modern games have moved away from. They're smoother, more forgiving, easier to pick up and play. But sometimes that comes at the cost of personality. In GTA 4, every mistake feels like your mistake. Take a corner too fast? That's on you. Misjudge your braking distance? You're probably ending up in a lamppost. It asks just a little bit more from the player. And because of that, every clean getaway feels earned. Then there are the crashes. This is another area where GTA 4 still manages to surprise people. The damage system wasn't just there to make cars look cool after an accident. It actually changed how you drove. One bad collision could leave the hood bent upward, blocking part of your view. Keep smashing into traffic, and the engine starts coughing. Smoke begins pouring out from under the hood. Eventually, the car gives up completely. Feels like you're driving a machine that's slowly falling apart. Even small crashes have consequences. Clip a curb too hard. Hit a guardrail. Sideswipe another vehicle. Every impact leaves some kind of mark. The world remembers what just happened. Then there's Euphoria. If you've ever wondered why GTA 4's characters still look so convincing when they fall over, this is a huge reason why. Instead of relying entirely on pre-made animations, Rockstar used a system that allowed characters to react dynamically to what was happening around them. That means no two falls are exactly the same. Someone hit by a car might stumble backwards while trying to keep their balance. Another might roll over the hood before collapsing onto the pavement. Sometimes an NPC grabs onto a nearby object. Sometimes they trip over a curb. Sometimes they almost recover before falling anyway. It's unpredictable, and that's exactly why it looks believable. Even today, you'll still see clips online of players discovering animations they've never seen before. Not because Rockstar handcrafted thousands of different falls, but because the system itself creates unique outcomes. The same philosophy extends to combat. Gunfights in GTA 4 have a weight to them. Enemies don't simply absorb bullets until a health bar reaches 0. They flinch, they stumble, they react depending on where they're hit. Sometimes they'll grab their shoulder. Other times they'll lose balance and fall backwards over a railing. Even taking cover feels more physical. You can feel Nico pressing himself against walls before leaning out to return fire. Every encounter feels grounded, messy, unpredictable, and that's exactly how a street shootout should feel. One of my favorite things to do isn't even part of a mission. It's finding a busy intersection and simply watching what happens. A minor traffic accident turns into a traffic jam. Someone starts honking. Another driver gets impatient and tries to squeeze through. A pedestrian walks around the wreck. An ambulance eventually arrives. None of it feels scripted. The game simply lets its systems interact with each other. And that's really what makes GTA 4's physics so memorable. It's not one big feature. It's hundreds of small systems constantly working together. Driving, walking, fighting, crashing, falling, reacting. Individually, none of them would be enough to define the game. But together, they create a world that feels surprisingly believable. Even now, with newer hardware and more advanced graphics, it's still easy to find yourself thinking, wait, a game from 2008 did that. And maybe that's why people still talk about GTA 4's physics all these years later. Not because they're perfect, but because they gave the world something that can't really be measured on a technical specification sheet. They gave it character. And when a game's systems have character, you remember them long after you've finished the story. All of those systems we've talked about so far, the city, the driving, the physics, they all serve one purpose. They make you believe the world you're playing in. But none of that would have mattered if the story didn't belong in that world. And that's where GTA 4 stands apart from almost every other game in the series. Because this isn't the story of someone chasing power. It's the story of someone trying to escape his past. Niko Bellic isn't introduced as some fearless action hero. He's tired. He's guarded. And from the moment he arrives in Liberty City, you can tell he's carrying far more than the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Most Grand Theft Auto protagonists start their journey looking for success. Money, respect, revenge, control. Nico's different. He comes to America chasing two things: a better life and answers. He's been told that America is the land of opportunity. Roman certainly makes it sound that way. Fast cars, big houses, beautiful women, a life where every problem can be solved with a little hard work and a bit of luck. It doesn't take long before both Nico and the player realize that Roman has been stretching the truth. His apartment is falling apart. He's drowning in debt. Loan sharks are constantly on his back. Instead of arriving in a dream, Nico walks straight into another struggle. And that's really what GTA 4 is about. Not chasing the American dream, questioning whether it ever existed in the first place. One of my favorite things about this story is how grounded it feels. Yes, you're still stealing cars, getting into shootouts, working for criminals, still Grand Theft Auto. But underneath all of that, Rockstar tells a surprisingly human story. Nico isn't proud of what he's done. Throughout the game, there are moments where he opens up about the war, about losing friends, about watching people betray each other just to survive. He doesn't tell these stories for sympathy. If anything, it feels like he wishes he could forget them himself. That's a huge difference compared to many open-world protagonists. Violence isn't exciting to Nico. It's familiar, almost routine. And honestly, that's what makes him so compelling. He rarely celebrates after completing a mission. He doesn't constantly joke about the people he's killed. Instead, there's this feeling that every job simply pulls him further away from the life he actually wanted. Even when money starts coming in, it never really changes him. He's still searching for peace, and no amount of cash seems capable of buying it. That emotional weight carries over into the people around him as well. Roman is probably the best example. On the surface, he's the comic relief. He's constantly making jokes, talking about women, calling Nico to go bowling. It's easy to laugh at him, but underneath all that optimism is someone who's desperately trying to convince himself that everything is going to be okay. Roman lies because hope is all he has left. Without it, he'd have to face the reality that the life he dreamed about simply isn't real. Then there's little Jacob, Brucey, Packy, Kate, even characters you only spend a handful of missions with feel like actual people instead of mission dispensers. They have their own personalities, their own problems, their own reasons for getting involved with Nico. Some help him, some use him, some genuinely care about him. Others see him as nothing more than another gun for hire. That makes every relationship feel unpredictable. And it makes Liberty City feel even more believable. Because not everyone you meet has the same goal. One thing Rockstar deserves a lot of credit for is restraint. There are emotional moments throughout GTA 4 that could have easily become over the top. But instead of forcing dramatic speeches or huge cinematic scenes, the game often lets silence do the work. A short pause during a conversation, the expression on Nico's face, a quiet drive home after a mission. Sometimes those moments say more than a page of dialogue ever could. Looking back now, it's hard not to appreciate how confident Rockstar was. They weren't afraid to slow things down. They trusted the player to pay attention, to listen, to connect the dots. That's something we don't see very often anymore. Many modern games are constantly trying to entertain you every second. Another explosion, another cutscene, another objective. GTA 4 isn't afraid to breathe. It gives you space to think about what just happened. And because of that, the story stays with you long after the credits roll. What's really interesting is how perfectly the gameplay supports that tone. Think about it. Imagine if Nico's story had been dropped into a world filled with flying bikes, laser weapons, and constant explosions. It wouldn't work. Not because those things aren't fun. They absolutely are. But because they'd completely undermine the grounded atmosphere Rockstar spent the entire game building. Everything, from the city to the physics to the writing, is pulling in the same direction. They're all trying to convince you that this world could actually exist. That these people could actually exist. And that Nico Bellic could be a real person trying to outrun a past he'll never truly escape. That's what makes GTA 4's story so memorable. It isn't trying to make you feel like the most powerful person in Liberty City. It's trying to make you understand the person behind the controller. And nearly 20 years later, that's still one of Rockstar's greatest achievements. If you've played GTA 5 after spending time in GTA 4, you've probably noticed it almost immediately. Something feels different. Not necessarily worse, just different. The cars are easier to control. The movement is smoother. The world feels brighter. Everything is faster, more responsive, and designed to get you into the action as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what Rockstar intended. It's important to remember that GTA 4 wasn't universally loved when it first launched. While critics praised its realism, a lot of players had mixed feelings. Some thought the driving was frustrating. Others felt the game had become too serious. Some missed the over-the-top freedom that made San Andreas so memorable. Rockstar listened. When GTA 5 arrived 5 years later, you could see those changes almost everywhere. The driving became lighter and more forgiving. Cars responded instantly. You could weave through traffic at ridiculous speeds with very little effort. The tone shifted too. Los Santos was brighter, more colorful, more satirical. Instead of focusing on one emotionally scarred protagonist, Rockstar gave us 3 very different personalities, each bringing a different perspective to the story. And it worked. GTA 5 became one of the biggest entertainment releases in history. Millions of players loved the faster gameplay, the larger world, and the endless possibilities offered by GTA Online. From a business perspective, Rockstar made the right decision. But every decision comes with a trade-off. As the gameplay became more accessible, some of the grounded feeling that made GTA 4 so unique slowly faded away. Cars still looked fantastic. The world was bigger than ever. But driving no longer demanded the same level of attention. Collisions didn't always carry the same sense of weight. The overall experience felt more like a playground than a living city. Again, that isn't necessarily a criticism. They're simply trying to achieve different things. GTA 5 wants you to have fun causing chaos. GTA 4 wants you to believe the chaos could actually happen. Those are 2 completely different design philosophies. Neither one is objectively better. It simply depends on the kind of experience you're looking for. And maybe that's why discussions about GTA 4 never really disappeared. The game offered something that no other entry in the series has quite replicated. Not because it had the biggest map, not because it had the most activities, but because it committed to its vision from beginning to end. Nearly 2 decades have passed since GTA 4 first released. Technology has improved. Open worlds have become larger. Graphics have become more realistic. And yet, people still reinstall GTA 4. People still upload videos breaking down its physics. People still compare Liberty City to modern open worlds. People still argue about whether Rockstar should bring some of these ideas back. That doesn't happen by accident. Games don't stay relevant for this long because of nostalgia alone. Nostalgia might convince you to replay a game, but quality is what convinces you to stay. And every time I come back to Liberty City, I'm reminded of something that modern games sometimes forget. Realism isn't about making every texture sharper, or adding more reflections, or increasing the number of buildings on a map. Realism is about making the player believe. Believe that the city exists beyond the edge of the screen. Believe that its people have lives outside your missions. Believe that every crash has weight. Every conversation has meaning. Every choice has consequences. That's what GTA 4 understood so well. Even today, I'll occasionally load up an old save with no goal in mind. I'll steal an ordinary car, turn on the radio, drive through Broker while it's raining, watch pedestrians rush across the street to escape the weather, listen to distant sirens echo between apartment buildings. And for a few minutes, it doesn't feel like I'm playing a game from 2008. It just feels like Liberty City. Maybe that's why this game continues to leave such a lasting impression on so many people. Not because it was perfect. It wasn't. Some missions dragged on. The driving won't appeal to everyone. And yes, there were features from San Andreas that many players still miss. But despite all of its flaws, GTA 4 had confidence. It knew exactly what it wanted to be. It didn't try to please everyone. It chose immersion over convenience, atmosphere over spectacle, weight over speed. And nearly 20 years later, those decisions are exactly what people remember. Maybe that's the real legacy of GTA 4. Proved that an open-world game doesn't need to be the biggest. It doesn't need the fastest cars, or the most activities. Sometimes, all it needs is a world that feels believable enough for players to lose themselves in. Because once you've experienced a Liberty City that feels alive, it's hard not to look for that feeling in every open-world game that comes after. And even now, very few have managed to capture it quite the same way. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What made GTA 4 special to you? Was it the story, the physics, the atmosphere, or was it something completely different? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep dives into the games that defined an era, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.